Hello, fellow Liberty classmates. I am Amy Ventitulo, and I am here to share with you my presentation based on Chapter 24 of our textbook, Other New Technologies. So as you pull up the PowerPoint, you can follow along to this video. Next slide. So the first place we'll start is the technology of virtual, augmented, and mixed reality. So virtual reality, or VR, is everything being digital that you see. Everything is make-believe. Then there's augmented reality, or AR. And AR is when there's virtual objects overlaid on top of real objects, but there is no interaction. You may see these virtual objects come in your view, but you cannot interact with them. Then there's the next level, which is mixed reality, or MR. It is just like AR, but you can interact with those virtual or digital objects. An example of this, of augmented reality, is an example I'm sure we're all familiar with, or heard of at least, which is Pokemon Go. So since Pokemon Go's debut in 2016, it really dazzled viewers. You were able to log into this mobile game called Pokemon Go, and you would see these Pokemon characters coming onto your screen. You could chase them, you could capture them, and you would get points in the game. Obviously, we can see there's some dangers to this. So people were so engrossed and focused intensely on the game, they really lost awareness of their surroundings. So since the game has debuted, sadly, people playing Pokemon Go have been stabbed, shot, robbed at gunpoint, fallen off a cliff. Sadly, a couple abandoned their 2-year-old child to play the game. There's been multiple attempted child abductions, and a wanted man actually stumbled into a police station playing the game, and they were able to apprehend him. So we can see there are many dangers to being so intently involved in an augmented reality game that we just really have to take caution. And you can see in the PowerPoint, the photo on the right is a perfect example of a younger gentleman playing the game, engrossed. Looks like he's very unaware of his surroundings. He's in a dark alley, dark street at night, totally engrossed in a screen. So we can see again the dangers of something like this. Next slide. So all of these devices require a wearable headset, VR, AR, MR. So they range in price and they range in capabilities. So you can start as simple as something like Google Cardboard, which is actually made of cardboard, and it retails for about $15. Then there's the Samsung Gear VR, which retails for about $99, and the Facebook's Oculus Rift, which retailed for about $5.99, but is currently unavailable. Instead, they are now promoting other headsets like the Oculus Go, which retails for about $199, but does not need to be powered by your PC. So you can be wearing this headset untethered from your PC, wearing it mobily. There are even VR film festivals. There's one called Kaleidoscope VR, which offers 360 video and sound from these filmmakers. Next slide. So what does this really all mean in terms of our daily application of VR, AR, or MR? So applications could be anything for VR and AR, from gaming and entertainment, as we saw with Pokemon Go, lifestyle and shopping. An example would be, I recently used an app to purchase a pair of sunglasses, and I could virtually try on the sunglasses on my face before I bought them. And then public safety, and of course science and exploration. In terms of applications for MR, there is the best example was Magic Leap 1. And Magic Leap 1 is a headset where images are projected through a high-tech light that they claim are actually virtually indistinguishable from real objects, and allows you to interact with the objects. So not only do they look so real, you can actually hold them, touch them, move them. This Magic Leap 1 is funded by Google and retails for about $2,295. While this is really cool, it makes me think of one thing. Next slide. Tony Stark's Jarvis. So really cool, but also kind of creepy. Tony Stark in the movie Iron Man was able to ask Jarvis to pull up various plans, and he could hold them, move them, manipulate them, and that's exactly what this type of technology reminds me of. Fun fact, so I love how things we've learned about in other chapters are coming into kind of a synergy with what we're learning about in our current chapters. And I remember from the Internet of Things, or IoT chapter, we learned about the compatibility with all of our smart devices, or non-compatibility. Mark Zuckerberg has actually created Iron Man's Jarvis in his spare time. So Mark Zuckerberg wanted something like Jarvis, so he made a program that could actually text back with him. And it also began to get smarter, if you will, and was able to recognize faces and people from his Ring doorbell and really start to have this kind of connectivity with all of his devices. His challenge, though, was that his non-smart devices had a lot of trouble with capability, and he still wanted it to be more intuitive as it already sounds. So he admittedly says this is really nothing quite like the Jarvis we see in Iron Man. It still has a long way to go, but somewhat impressive that he's brought it this far so far. Next slide. So we're moving on now into drones, drone technology. Drones are remotely piloted aircraft designed to hold a filming device or GoPro type device. So they're used by consumers in a couple of ways for recreation and hobby. I have a family member who has purchased a recreational drone, and they love to fly it over these big open park spaces in our community and catch these really great aerial footage, kind of for their own fun. These can be fairly inexpensive, anywhere from $20 to $2,000. Fun fact, so the hit show Game of Thrones uses drones frequently in their filming, as you can see to the photo on the right. But they have the most trouble with people trying to fly private drones over their set so they can get a sneak peek on what's happening in the next episode or the next season. Next slide. So they're also used by the business and public sector industries. So as we saw with Game of Thrones, media and entertainment, and then public safety drone use has actually gone up from the year 2017 to 2018, 82%. So the public sector law enforcement is really getting a hang of using drones for their purposes. And these drone devices, these very high-tech drone devices, can ring to the tune of about $18,000 on average per drone. Fun fact, so while our textbook mentions that Amazon was unable to deliver products and goods via drones, my hometown, Reno, Nevada, was actually one of the first in the nation who's embarking on doing this. So one of our local Reno-based companies, Flirty, has received an FAA pilot program license to actually look at piloting delivering goods via drones in our area. Next slide. So now we're moving into a concept called the sharing economy. So I'm sure we've all utilized the sharing economy in one way or another, whether we realize it or not, which is the ecosystem built around sharing human, physical, and intellectual resources. So for an example, when I'm not using my home or my apartment, my bike, or my car, I could theoretically rent it out or share it. So this has led to a few things. Disruptive innovations. So a couple industries that have been severely disrupted by the sharing economy is the taxi cab industry with something like Uber or Lyft, and the hotel industry with something like Airbnb. They're no longer the only players in town thanks to the sharing economy. It's also created this rise of the gig culture. So Uber drivers, after they've had maybe an 8-to-5 job, can log on their own time, use their own time, and decide when to work. Also the same thing with drivers of Grubhub or something like Uber Eats. The other thing it's led to is this crowdfunding technology. So we've all heard, I'm sure, of Kickstarter or GoFundMe, and they pool resources to help people or create projects. So another fun fact, as we learned about earlier in the VR section, Oculus Rift was actually started and created by raising money from a Kickstarter campaign. Next slide. So now let's look at the technology of mobile commerce and virtual currency. So mobile commerce really is the purchasing of goods or services available via a mobile device. And there are three subsets of this. Mobile banking. So I personally have a Wells Fargo mobile app on my phone, and I can easily use it to transfer funds, look at balances. It's extremely convenient. There's also apps to purchase. So for example, on my phone, I also have a Starbucks app where I can purchase drinks and then go pick them up. Also, by the way, makes you feel like a little bit of a rock star. Then there are mobile wallets. An example would be I have also on my phone an Apple Wallet, which stores all my debit card information. Next slide. So the next piece of this mobile commerce and virtual currency is virtual currency, which is a form of digital currency that represents monetary value in electronic form and remains outside of regulatory purview. So what this means is there's this digital money, so to speak, or cryptocurrency that remains unregulated. It's not unregulated. It's not legal tender. It's not given out and verified by our local government, or federal government. So it relies on a system of trust, and it cannot be associated or issued or validated by a central bank. It's a little confusing. I'm on the same page with you if you don't quite understand it. Next slide. So also really cool and kind of creepy, this virtual currency or cryptocurrency. This slide that I found, this graphic that I found, was really one of the best ways I could find of bringing this kind of abstract concept a little more understandable. So again, it's stored electronically on the blockchain, and it has no intrinsic value. It has no physical form. And again, it's not determined by a central bank. It's completely decentralized. Next slide. So this works because it's stored on something called the blockchain. And the blockchain really is an incorruptible digital ledger. It's really the best way to describe the blockchain if you're really not familiar with it or really don't understand it. So the blockchain works because data comes in blocks. So imagine these blocks of digital data. So the blocks are then chained or connected together, hence the term blockchain. And the reason the blockchain is so innovative is because it's virtually unalterable. That's because of this function called a cryptographic hash function. So when you store something on the blockchain, it goes through this hashing. In the simplest terms, hashing is taking an input string of any length and giving an output fixed length. So let's say you try to upload this data. It doesn't matter if it's a small chain of data or a huge chain of data, it will always output 256 bits in length. And this hash, really I kind of think of it as a digital key, allows you to pull up the exact data you input. So it means once something has been entered onto the blockchain, it can't be tampered with. If you were to try to get in and alter the data that was on the blockchain, even if you could, it would produce an entirely different hash, even if you only altered one small piece of data. So it would be very clear and obvious that this has been altered. So an example, a fun fact, is that the local government I currently work for has been the first in the nation to store and to send electronically certified marriage certificates using the blockchain. And I wanted to bring this example up because it helps bring makes the example a little bit more concrete in our minds. So our recorder's office, which handles all marriage certificates, they store and they keep all of marriage certificates that occur in our county. They were really unable to help people who needed a marriage certificate quickly. An example would be there was a couple who was taking a cruise for their honeymoon. They were across the country. They needed to board the cruise ship, but the new married name didn't match the name on the passport. So they had to get it verified. How do you get it verified? With your marriage certificate. So when they called the recorder's office, it was really unfortunate because the only way to get it to them was via snail mail, which of course can take anywhere from 3 to 7 days. So that wouldn't help these people at all. So they thought we have to find a faster way of almost instantaneously getting people their documents. So email might come to mind. Why not just email it over? because the receiving government on the other end has no way of verifying if that certificate was altered. It could be someone creating the certificate in their basement and trying to email it over. There's no way of verifying it. So by storing these marriage certificates digitally on the blockchain, it allowed the receiving government to get a clearly verified copy. This was a certified, unaltered document that they accepted on their end. So when these instances happen in the future where someone needs it in a pinch, we can store it on the blockchain and send it over as quickly as you can put together an email, and they can get their documents when they need it. Next slide. So as I'm looking at all these new communication technologies, this is the scripture that continually comes to my mind, and I'm going to read it. It's from the book of Revelation 13, verses 16 and 17. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Next slide. So my questions to you are this. After all of the new technologies we reviewed, or ones we didn't review, what new communication technologies do you think will emerge? I would love to hear your thoughts in your brainstorm on what you think will be an emergent technology. And do these new technologies scare or excite you? Thank you so much for watching my presentation, and I can't wait to hear your responses. God bless.